is your sense of pride in your own place, in your own family achievements and in the community organisations you belong to. It is this pride of place and the recording and preservation of local history that is at the very core of what we are trying to achieve here at the museum. A sincere thank you to our fellow museum volunteers who proofread articles and who are helping out here tonight with catering and selling journals, but also volunteer on a regular basis to ensure that the museum is open 7 days a week and that fundraising events, exhibitions and lectures run successfully. Finally, thanks must go to Darren Hurley of Prisma Print, who has done a superb job in printing the journal again for us this year. I hope you all enjoy this journal, recommend it to your family and friends, and are encouraged to write an article for the next journal. I will now hand you over to Louise to say a few words.
Firstly, I would like to thank you all very much for coming out in this cold, very wet November evening, night. I know it's not easy leaving the fire on the couch to go outside, so thank you very much, because it's only for your continued support that we can have events like this and that we can, have gatherings like this. So I'd like to thank you all very much. Mary has said an awful lot there, and I don't want to repeat what Mary said, but I would like just to say a few thank yous as well to Mary Lehan for doing wonderful food tonight. Sometimes I wonder, do we do these occasions so that Mary will do the food for us, but just discreetly, and for Tom Mullins for doing food also. And again, I know, and I'm getting nervous now because I left my notes in the car. I'm so nervous. But just getting back to the contributors that write the articles, Mary touched on it there, and like writing an article isn't easy. It's not like just sitting down at the table and just putting something together. Like I sincerely appreciate, I know we all do, all the work and effort that goes into putting an article together, between getting the photographs, the captions, the proper dates, and putting a story together that's an easy read for everyone to enjoy. So like the good thing about the journals is that all the information on this journal, even the first one of People and Places and this one of People and Places, can be got on Google or on social media. These stories are specifically on this journal and cannot be got anywhere else. So these journals are keepsakes for now and for the next generation. And even looking around the room tonight and watching people coming in, like I know everyone has interesting stories about their people, their ancestors, the places that they grew up in, that need to be recorded. And like none of us here are professional writers, certainly none of us in the group here are professional writers, or even most people here in the room aren't professional writers. But if you just take the time to sit down and put these words together, it's amazing what you can come up with and what people are interested in knowing about all corners of their parish and outside their parish. So, I would urge you all to kind of, take time if you could, and I know everyone is busy, to put something together that you'll have and, that can be passed down to the next generation. So that's your homework now for the next journey. But thank you again. I know, again, Darren actually in Prisma Print, he's actually not here tonight, but if he was, and I hope he gets that information back. He was very good, he was very patient, he was very obliging, and he did give us a high-end quality journal that we can be very proud of as well, that we can put in the shops and sell. So thanks a million to Darren. I'll leave you now to Brian, who needs absolutely no introduction. And Brian is so good to come down from Dublin. I know he's not from the Kilmurry parish, he's from the neighbouring parish, but Brian has very strong connections here in Kilmurry. So I'd like to welcome Charlie and Margaret Burke and see Sinead and Cahill for Brian's family. So I'll leave you at it, and thank you again, Brian. And I'll leave you at it.
Hi folks, thank you very much for having me here this evening. It's a real honour, and as the previous speaker said, I appreciate you coming out when the weather is so brutal out there, so thank you for coming out. Great to be here, and just to echo what was said there, great to have lots of family in the audience as well. Good to see some familiar faces and some neighbours from Farran as well here this evening. So thank you all very, very much. This is, of course, a history of people from Kilmurry and surrounding areas, but I was drawn to a reference in the book to my own native Farran. Sorry to be parochial about it, but it was from the article One Man's Journey, referring to Sean S. O'Connell, Quartermaster G Company with the IRA in Cork, and there's a reference to a raid on a house, on Farran House. One such raid was on Captain Clark's in Farran. 11 men, including Sean O'Connell and Walter Furlong, approached the house. They'd heard there was a shooting party taking place on the estate. Sean O'Connell knocked on the door while others hid nearby, and when the door was opened by a maid, they burst inside, brandishing revolvers. Shots were fired, and Captain Clark was hit in the hand. The volunteers left in Clark's car along with arms and ammunition, and that took place in Farran House. And when I was growing up, you would pass Farran House, which most of you will probably know as this big imposing mansion up halfway up Farran Hill that overlooks the surrounding countryside, and I'd pass the big gates and the walls and wondering what was going on inside and the histories that would be held inside those walls, and if those walls could talk. And there we have a very dramatic event taking place. And I suppose for me it was a reminder that history is on all our doorsteps. Small local stories that can form an important part of a big picture, like the fight for independence or the formation of a new state. As a journalist, I have had the privilege to have a front row seat on modern history, and during my time covering US politics, I witnessed and reported on some world-changing events. And I want to just briefly turn to another reference in the book, looking at the whole area of US politics, and it was the very interesting story of a man by the name of, I'll get him here now for us, Richard O'Sullivan Burke. I don't know if he's any relation, Charlie, maybe he is. And this guy was really fascinating. The article, first off, by Cathy O'Sullivan, an American. He was a soldier in the American Civil War, an engineer, a Fenian, and above all, an adventurer. And Richard, he canvassed for James A. Garfield, 20th US president, who was assassinated less than 4 months into his presidency, and best known for saying, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable." And that struck with me. And during my time covering US politics, there was a lot of focus on the truth, because I was in Washington during the presidency of Donald Trump. The man who coined the phrase fake news. One of his advisors infamously once said that the president wasn't telling lies, he was merely presenting alternative facts. And Richard O'Sullivan Burke may well have been an observer of the US election of 1880, but 140 years later, I got to be an observer of election 2020 in the US. Trump v. Biden, a showdown that could well be playing out again next year in the US. And the race for the White House in 2020 was a US election like no other, because it took place during the COVID-19 pandemic. There were restrictions on the usual big campaign rallies that we would associate with US elections, but despite being told that he wasn't supposed to hold any of these rallies, Donald Trump would do it anyway, and I would go there with my cameraman Murray to cover these big gatherings for RTE News. And at a time when people were told to wear their masks, I'd go to Donald Trump's rallies and none of the people would be wearing masks, they'd all be packed closely together, and I'd ask the president's supporters if they were concerned about the potential health risks, and they would tell me that the pandemic had been overhyped, that wasn't really that bad, and they were confident that God and Trump would protect them. COVID, of course, was a huge story around the world, but there was also massive focus on Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic, and of course he would always downplay it and make controversial suggestions about treatments, at one point suggesting that he wondered if you could ingest disinfectants in order to cure the pandemic. By mid-2020 it became very clear that November's election would look very different because of COVID-19. There was going to be early voting, postal voting, and from early on Donald Trump tried to sow the seeds of doubt in that process, saying there'd be a widespread voter fraud. And on election night it all played out as predicted. In he crowded foul, he claimed the election had been stolen and that he was the real winner. Many of his supporters were of course enraged, and I covered these Stop the Steal rallies that would be held in Washington, where they would gather to voice their opposition. And when you'd say to these supporters that there was no evidence that the election had been stolen, they would say it was lies from the fake news media. And I got the sense from them that they really believed that Donald Trump had something up his sleeve, that he was going to pull something out of the bag at the last minute, a grand plan that would overturn the election results. Now, I was used to covering these election rallies, and normally he would point to us, the media, at the back of the room and say, oh, look at the fake news media there, and everybody would boo, but it was all kind of a pantomime. He didn't really mean it. Donald Trump actually liked the media, he just didn't like being called out on his falsehoods. But the Stop the Steal rallies had a different vibe. People were genuinely angry, and of course it all boiled up to that point on January 6th. We began our day outside the White House when Donald Trump told his supporters to fight like hell and march to the Capitol building. And as my cameraman and I set up to broadcast from in front of the Capitol building into the 9 o'clock news that night, there were emergency vehicles going by us and sirens. And as we finished our broadcast, a group of Donald Trump supporters started screaming fake news at us. And it was a tense situation until some police came along to defuse things. Donald Trump, of course, is very much back with a bang as we get ready for next year's election in the US. 4 years on, there's been rapid advances in technology and artificial intelligence that have led to real fears about the spread of misinformation and disinformation in the election campaign, and it could bring a whole new meaning to the term fake news. What would Richard O'Sullivan Burke make of US politics today? And how will the history books written 140 years from now record the tumultuous times in which we currently live? At a time when there has never been so much concern about the truth and the ability to deceive, it is accurate and detailed stories about people and places in our locality that will stand the test of time, cut through the noise, and leave us with the real facts and not the alternative truths that can often get in the way. I congratulate you all on this wonderful, wonderful publication, and I'm delighted to be here to launch it this evening. Thank you all very, very much for that.
And I hope everyone can stay for a cup of tea or a mulled wine. There's alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and there's lovely food in the back of the room. So thank you again for your time, and yeah, Brian, thank you very, very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.